What's up guys? Today I really want to talk about the character of Frankie in Knights of Guinevere. But this isn't going to be some first in a series of videos where I talk about each of the characters the way I do with other shows like The Amazing Digital Circus. Instead, I really just wanted to make a video talking about Frankie in particular because of the surprise hit she is, not just with me, but with a lot of fans of the new show. And I think there's some really interesting reasons why, so let's break it all down. So in a show with so many interesting characters, why Frankie? Until the airing of the pilot episode, I would say the show treated Frankie as its least important character, with all the promos and teasers having a stronger focus on the android Gwen and perhaps even Andy. In the promotional materials, I mostly remember it being Andy and Frankie, treating them very much like an evened out duo. And visually, that idea is there. Andy and Frankie were designed to look like opposites to a degree. Small and big, serious and happy, a little dark and a little light. But the way the show was promoted, it seemed like Andy was going to be the leader of this duo. And by extension, the real main character, with Gwen Zero being just an android who can't fully interact with the others. After watching the pilot, however, Frankie has clearly become the fan favorite character and the character with the most heart in the show, while also tapping into something that other shows just don't. And to some degree, I think this has something to do with representation. Representation is such a controversial word these days, even among people who fight for more diverse representation, as just because a show or movie tries to give representation, it doesn't mean the audience is going to enjoy it. Dana Terrace was already known for representation in her previous series, The Owl House, which featured lesbian relationships and characters outside of the gender binary. The Owl House was known for its great characters in general, who all feel like a sort of blur of people you may have known in real life. But Knights of Guinevere, at least with its pilot, does something a bit more subtle, and I think that is where a lot of Frankie's popularity is coming from. Frankie is a woman, but when first seen in the teasers without any lines, some fans, including myself, thought she was just a man with long hair. The pilot made it clear that Frankie is referred to as a woman, but some fans theorize that Frankie is trans or simply gender non-conforming. Not just because of her appearance, but because her boss Sparky refers to her full name as Franklin instead of what we hear elsewhere, which is Francesca. To some fans, this implies that Frankie was born with the masculine name Franklin and chose to use a more feminine name to represent how they feel and how they feel they present. And this could be proven and thoroughly explored in the show at some point as well. But right now it's ambiguous enough that you know that the authors don't want you to know outright anything of this sort about Frankie. The thing about ambiguity, however, is that it makes Frankie feel like a very relatable character to a lot of people, because it doesn't restrict her to a single identity label. Frankie also doesn't restrict herself in terms of what any identity label may mean for her, as whether she's just living the life she was born into, or she made a choice that we'd call transitioning, she focuses very clearly on just being who she is, which at the end of the day is a very realistic woman, one who started as a very realistic little girl. In the pilot, the first we see of Andy and Frankie is the two of them trying to sneak into Park Planet and use their little hacking Game Boy to get free credits on a Guinevere crane game. Here, we see that she appears to be an even bigger fan of Guinevere than Andy, who loves the character but doesn't seem quite captured with its magic the way Frankie is. To some degree, this is because Frankie seems to have delusional thinking, and she imagines her thoughts as being spoken to her by talking cartoon animals. The same talking animals that Gwen sees that are part of her franchise. This can be an okay thing, as everyone has different ways their thoughts are presented to them. Many people don't imagine their own voice telling them things from themselves, but they go through different phases in life for how their different thoughts are filtered to them. For Frankie, however, it can be dangerous, because these thoughts push her to do crazy things, and they try to use flawed cartoon logic to do so. It's a reminder that Frankie isn't just a fan, but that the word fan comes from the word fanatic. It's someone who gets so wrapped up in these stories that their thinking becomes affected by it, often in very negative ways. In many cases, this is because the person isn't able to deal with what their current reality actually is, and thus franchises that offer a sort of escapism become a way for them to frame their world. After meeting the robot Gwen as children in the theme park, Andy and Frankie both dream of growing up to work as engineers in the park, but only Andy goes on to make this happen. What's really sad is that Frankie is actually better at repairing androids and putting together tech than Andy is. Frankie is apparently the one who put together her Game Boy hacker to get them free stuff, and even though Andy works for Park Planet, it's Frankie's ideas that make her job easier. We see this when Andy is trying to repair a robot head from home but struggles with it, only for Frankie to laugh about how the system is designed in a flawed way and that it would run smoother with a slight change. Andy makes this change and it works, but she pretends it wasn't Frankie who gave her the idea, and it hints at a lot of issues in their relationship, like Andy only getting to where she is because of the guidance of Frankie, who doesn't realize just how smart she actually is. But then why doesn't Frankie work as an engineer? She likely had opportunities to apply like Andy, but based on the fact that Andy got fired after fixing the animatronic head, I would have to guess that Frankie's genius is just too much for the park. Frankie's solution worked and saved time, but it wasn't the protocol of the park that relies on its systems to be streamlined in the way that they are, even if they end up being sucky in certain parts. And this change that Andy made on Frankie's advice seems to be what got Andy fired. Frankie thus really is just smarter than the techs at the theme park, but her creativity and control is too much for the theme park to rein in. Instead of having shitty engineers that work around their system, they would have to build a system around a genius engineer, someone they would owe more and more to over time creatively. A lot of this is meant to remind us of the creator's experience working at Disney, Dana Terrace, where all of her ideas and the ideas of other Disney showrunners had to be filtered through the systems and guidelines of the big corporation, and people with ideas that are just too big, too grand, or too game-changing simply can't get their shows made. Frankie, however, is the best at fixing Gwen droids, and she even managed to fix Gwen's finger as a child when the park engineers seemingly couldn't themselves. And it makes it extra sad that someone like her is being kept out of the park despite the magic that she wants to bring to it. The person that Frankie reminds me of in particular is a girl I knew back in 6th grade we called Chris. This was the kind of girl who was like Frankie in that she was a big girl and had long hair, but who didn't put herself in what we'd call feminine clothes. She wasn't goth or punk, but she'd typically just wear black jeans and a black hoodie. She didn't act like girly stuff was gross or anything like that, but she was actually very happy and confident in herself from what I remember. And like Frankie, she would shorten her name to something that wasn't exactly masculine, but ambiguous, in the form of Chris instead of Christina. And yet, she was also extremely obsessed with Sailor Moon and other extremely girly type animes, as we'd call them. Now, this isn't too shocking, as even plenty of guys like myself were really into Sailor Moon, and Chris was actually the one who helped me get into Sailor Moon by showing me it had much more complex stories and themes in the Japanese version and the manga than what we got in our English dubs. But what I'm trying to get to here is that Chris was like Frankie, presenting more as masculine, but also having no shame in classic girl franchises. One she loved and adored without having to emulate it, or without having to look at herself in a negative light because of it, as if she wasn't enough for that role. There's a lot of ways to do representation, but I think one thing that people really respond well to with Frankie is the fun blend of personality traits she has that doesn't make it into other cartoons. Gwen isn't some random theme park android, she's literally every Disney princess turned into a singular character like Barbie, who is given each and every possible pretty outfit for different jobs and themes. I think shows like Sailor Moon really make people think that their primary fan base is ditzy skinny girls who are into this sort of thing, but in reality, even to say that the opposite is true would be simplifying the truth too much. Frankie, I think, resonates with so many people because we all see a bit of ourselves in her as fans. People who are human, who aren't perfectly shaped cartoon characters, who all have our own presentations of masculine and feminine, but who all grew up loving these supposedly perfect images of femininity and even masculinity in our childhood media and cartoons. She's just someone that feels like that friend we all knew who loved certain cartoons or anime, but wasn't some sort of physical embodiment of them, and to some degree even ourselves, as we said. But what do you guys think? There's a lot of reasons to appreciate Frankie, but let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, or maybe who in your life they remind you of. See you guys next time.